So we've reached module 14 where we're going to talk about infancy and childhood, the different theories pertaining to the cognitive development and the social development of infants and children. So infancy is the newborn growing into almost toddlerhood, which is around 2 or 3 years of age. And childhood is the process of toddlers growing into almost teenagers, which obviously is 13 years of age. For each of these stages in infancy and childhood, we're going to talk about brain development, motor development, and cognitive development, and talk about the different theories, maturation biologically, and the development cognitively with focusing on Piaget's theory. And then finally, social and emotional development, which we're going to cover from the perspective of attachment theory. So what is maturation? Maturation is not the meaning you might think. So you might think, well, you're at your age, you're a very immature person, as in this person is displaying behavior that is not appropriate, that they should have learned to display more appropriate behavior by now. That's not what we talk about in terms of maturation when it comes to development. In psychology and in development, maturation refers to the changes that occur primarily because of the passage of time. So these are physical changes that are occurring as a child gets older. Maturation is a biologically driven process. So there's a sequence of biological changes that happen in infancy and childhood that leads to the differential display of abilities and behaviors that infants and children go through as they grow. They go through a set series of sequences biologically that leads to, obviously, crawling, walking, etc. And these sequences have to be in a particular order. So an infant will first learn to sit up, and then learn to crawl, and then learn to walk. They don't learn to walk and then learn to sit up. So biology dictates the sequence in which a series of behaviors or developmental milestones occur. Experience, which is nurture or the environment, can adjust the timing, but nature, maturation, biologically driven processes set the sequence. And so it doesn't really matter how much that a parent plays classical music or has the baby Einstein out for their infant. This is not playing a huge role because the changes need to take place biologically. And just because you're playing certain music or you're interacting and talking to your child over and over again doesn't mean that the biological changes are going to occur faster. That's not to say that nurture or the environment doesn't play a role, but it's to say that I think parents overestimate how much role they play in their child's development. A lot of it is just the biological changes occurring in the child's body. So you look at maturation in terms of brain development, and then with brain development, changes in motor development. So the brain develops really rapidly, starting in the womb, where the number of neurons grows by about 750,000 new cells per minute in the middle trimester. Beginning at birth, the connections among neurons, the synaptic connections, proliferate. And so you start forming more and more neural networks. And the neural networks and the connections that you're forming is the basis for all learning going forward. During infancy, the growth of the neural connections takes place initially in less complex parts of the brain. The older regions of the brain that we talked about back at the beginning of the course, the brainstem and the limbic system, the more primitive parts, as well as the motor and sensory strips. This enables basic survivals. This enables basic emotions, so something like anxiety. Very important for survival, that the infant learns to fear certain situations and behaviors. And that's due to the rapid development in the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. And by early childhood, neural connections start proliferating in the cortex, in the association areas of the cortex. This enables more advancements in controlling attention and behavior, frontal lobe, controlling inhibitions of behaviors, right? So preventing from acting, preventing from saying things that are inappropriate. And this also leads to advancements in thinking, memory, and language. So the neural growth starts in the limbic system and starts in the brainstem, very primitive, survival-oriented aspects of the brain, and then it advances up by childhood to the cortex. Now, in terms of motor development, maturation takes place in the body and the cerebellum, enabling the sequence below. Physical training or nurture cannot generally change the timing. So no matter how much you cheer for your child, please crawl, please walk, please talk, it's not going to really have that big of an influence on what they're doing. You have to wait for the brain and the body to mature to an appropriate point where they're going to engage in the behavior. So sitting is around 6 months, sitting unsupported. Crawling is between 8 or 9 months. And now, of course, there's a lot of individual differences in each of these. Walking around 12 months and walking independently around 15 months. And then talking could range from between 1 year of age to 2 years of age. It even goes beyond 2 years of age in some cases. And in some cases, that's normal. By 3 years or 2.5 to 3 years of age, if there's no communication, then that's kind of a red flag. You have to think in terms of autism as a possibility. But there's lots of individual differences in how fast children engage in these milestone events. But they will always engage in this order: sitting, crawling, walking, and then walking independently. Baby memory, as we mentioned in the memory chapters, is called infantile amnesia. This is the lack of memories for the first 3 years of life, and this is due to, the slow maturation of the hippocampus. So you don't know what's going on at your first birthday party, but you can still learn skills. So even though you can't form explicit memories in your first 3 years of life, you can still form implicit memories, procedural memories, because that's controlled by the cerebellum and basal ganglia. So you can learn to kick a mobile in a particular direction to obtain the desired result. And obviously, motor-based memory is inherent in crawling and walking, of course. In terms of cognitive development, we define cognition as the mental activities that help us function, including problem solving, figuring out how the world works, developing models and concepts, retrieving and storing knowledge, using language, and self-talk and inner thoughts, an idea of self-concept. And cognitive development progresses through a series of stages according to Piaget, which is the most famous model of cognitive development in infants and up to children, up to adolescents. Piaget said we don't start being able to think like adults. And Piaget studied many of the errors in cognition made by children in order to understand in what ways they think differently than adults. And, so children are not mini adults, and Piaget realized that they make errors that adults don't make. Here's one very common error that's made by toddlers, between 1 and 2.5 years of age. You see a child trying to sit on a miniature slide. Obviously, the toddler understands that, you go down the slide, you sit on the slide and you go down it. They probably went on many slides in a playground before and they find this fun. So they see an object, they identify it as a slide, and they say, well, I'm supposed to go down the slide. So they try to go down the slide, and obviously that's not going to work. And the same thing with the little car. I know I have to get into the car, open the door, get into the car, and get my seatbelt on. Well, here's another toddler trying to open the door of his car and trying to get in. And obviously, this is not going to work. This is a disaster. This child is a giant compared to this car. And this error in terms of perceiving the world is known as relative size. They don't understand that you need to compare your size to the size of the object that you're interacting with. Not just the function of the object, but the size. And there has to be a relative proportion. The slide has to be a lot bigger than I am for me to slide down it. And young children, young toddlers, before 3 years of age, struggle with the concept of relative size. Now, Piaget talked about cognitive development centering around the development of schemas. So, an infant's mind works hard to make sense of our experiences in the world, and they develop something called the schema, which is a mental container in which you hold our experiences. So, a schema is kind of like your idea of how the world works, if you think of it that way. When you're young, you have different ideas of how the world works. And then with experience, you modify those ideas so the schema becomes kind of more and more refined as you get older. But you start out, the schemas are very, very vague. And so, for example, an adult, the father or another family member is trying to teach this child about animals, and he shows the child a picture of a cow, and he says, cow, this is what cow is. So the child looks at the picture, says, okay, four-legged animal with fur, cow. That's my schema for cow. So now they move on and they find a deer, and the child says, look, cow, cow, cow. Well, it's not cow, but the child's schema for cow is very vague. It's just a four-legged animal with fur, and so every four-legged animal with fur is going to be cow. So the child's going to identify many, many different animals as cow until they get enough experience to start narrowing down the schemas and refining the schemas, and then knowing the difference between a cow and, a deer and a dog and a cat and all those different animals that have four legs. Now, I'll tell you a story from years ago when my nephew was 1 or 2 years of age, and he just referred to everyone as Guy. So it could be a man, it was Guy. It could be a boy, it was Guy. It could be a woman or a girl, they were all Guy. So everywhere he went, everyone was Guy. And he would point and say, Guy, Guy. He just point at different people, no matter if they're young, old, children, adults, male, female, everyone was just Guy. So that was his schema for Guy. And every human being in the world at that time met the schema for Guy. Everyone was Guy. And so it was just hilarious that you'd be watching TV, pointing at the TV, Guy, 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 Guy. And you go out with him and he'd be like pointing at people saying, Guy, Guy, Guy. And it was just comical. And I just laughed so much because that was his schema for Guy. Now, as he got older, then he realized that there are boys and girls and men and women. And not everyone was Guy. And now he doesn't use the word Guy at all. So his schema for Guy got refined and narrowed down and more specific as he got more experience in the world as he got older. And that's what happens with schemas. You get more experience, the child gets more experience, and the schemas get refined and changed. So Piaget talked about assimilation and accommodation for the schema. So let's say this girl uses her dog schema when encountering a cat. So once again, everything is dog. Four-legged fur animal, dog. And now the child encounters the cat. So the child could do one or two things. She can assimilate the experience of encountering the cat into her schema and call the cat as dog. So the cat belongs in the schema for dog, and so she calls the cat dog. She's assimilating. She's not changing the schema. She's just categorizing every furry four-legged animal as dog in this case. That's what assimilation is. Or she can change or refine the schema, accommodate the schema. So she can then say, okay, this is dog, and this dog is different from my schema from cat. And now she's made a distinction between dog and cat. She's accommodated her animal schema. She has changed it. She has refined it. And then eventually, with more experience, she'll be able to accommodate her schema for cat even further. And then she'll be able to tell different types of cats and different types of dogs, mostly different types of dogs, right? Might be small dog, large dog, black dog, white dog. And then eventually, when she gains more experience and gains more cognitive abilities, eventually the breeds of the dogs much later on. But she can accommodate her schema here by recognizing that the cat is different from the dog and then changing her schema or breaking off the schema for dog. Not everything is dog. Some things are cat, right? And that's accommodation. So either Go with the same schema where everything is dog, that's assimilation, or change the schema and then start dividing up animals into two different species, and that's accommodation. Now, Piaget believed that young infants and children went through a series of cognitive stages. So his is a stage theory, and it's a combination of nature and nurture. So children biologically change through, nature, right? They change, their brains develop, their bodies develop, and they also learn through interacting, playing with the environment, which is nurture. So it's not one continuous progression of change. So children make leaps in cognitive abilities from one stage to the next. So stage theories talk about milestone leaps. So you're jumping from one ability to the next. It's not a gradual change. It's a pretty profound change. And the first stage of Piaget's theory is the sensory motor stage, from birth to the age of 2. In the sensory motor stage, children explore by looking, hearing, touching, mouthing, grasping. And by 6 months, within the sensory motor stage still, they develop something called object permanence. And object permanence refers to the ability to perceive the object as there, even if it's not seen by the toddler's by the infant's eyes. So if it's out of sight, it's still there. That's object permanence. It could just be under a blanket, or it could be covered up. It doesn't necessarily mean because it's out of sight that it doesn't exist anymore. So that's by about 6 to 8 months. So this is why the game of peekaboo is so much fun for infants. Before 6 to 8 months, because when you put your hands over your face and then you go peekaboo and you remove your hands from your face and they see your face again, that infant actually believes that you are disappearing from the world, that you have magically vanished by putting your hands in front of your face. They can't see you, so you're gone. Because before 6 to 8 months, they do not have object permanence. So when they don't see you, you have vanished from the face of the earth. And then when you move your hands away from your face and they see you again, it's like amazing. It's like a magic trick. It's like you've vanished. You've disappeared and you've vanished in front of their eyes. And so that's why they're so excited. I mean, adults like magic. Well, peekaboo is like a magic trick to a young infant under the age of 6 to 8 months. Because you're actually vanishing from the world and reappearing. It's a pretty amazing trick. Piaget felt that kids in the sensory motor stage did not think abstractly, but there's some mixed evidence for this. There's some evidence that kids can notice violations in physics, such as the law of gravity. So if something doesn't obey gravity, very young infants kind of look at it strangely. They notice it. They pay attention to it, which means that they know something is wrong here. So if a child's paying attention and they kind of know something is wrong, like something's defying gravity, then children or infants at the sensory motor stage are actually thinking more abstractly. They actually have more advanced thinking mathematically and visual spatially than we really believe, or than that Piaget actually thought that they had. So when the soccer ball kind of flies up in the sky, the child is interesting. Like, how did that soccer ball fly up in the sky, right? Well, how did it defy gravity? So the child must have some inherent, very basic idea of how the world's supposed to work. And Piaget may have underestimated the abilities of young infants. Now, the second stage in Piaget's cognitive stage theory of development is the preoperational stage between the ages of 2 to 6 or 7. And during the preoperational stage, children start representing their schemas and even some feelings with words and images. So they use visual models, they engage in pretend play, they like to engage in role playing here. So I'm going to play doctor, or I'm going to play, cashier, like and they really like to play that role, and they sort of learn about the world and learn about different roles by pretend play. You know, the easy bake, the Dora's kitchen, the easy bake oven. You know, it's not a real oven, but the child thinks that they're actually, when they're using this like Dora's kitchen oven, that they're actually engaging in real baking. So they're pretending that they're engaging. They're pretending they're someone they're not. So they're learning about the world through swapping roles and pretending and dress up and all of these different things. Now, at this point, they don't have theory of mind, so they really don't understand the perspectives of others. But towards the 6 or 7 year mark, at the end of the preoperational stage, they start understanding that other people think differently than they do, that they are not the center of the universe. And it's during this preoperational stage, besides pretend play, these young children are not using logical thinking and they're not using abstract thinking at this point. So they're able to dress up, but they're able to play, and they're able to use words and images to display their feelings, but they're not able to engage in logical or abstract thinking yet. They're also not able to successfully complete a task called conservation, where if you pour liquid into different shaped glasses, these children just look at the level of liquid in the glass and don't look at the dimensions of the glass yet. So they're not able to do that. They're not able to do that complex calculation where they're looking at the size of the object and the width of the glass and the depth of the glass, and then using that to determine the level of the fluid. And you'll see this in some of the videos that I'm going to have you watch. So children in the preoperational stage are still stuck in a mode of egocentrism where they think they are the center of the world. And here's an example of a young child in preoperational stage that's engaging in egocentrism. So, do you have a brother? And the child says, yes, my brother is Jim. Does Jim have a brother? Oh no, Jim doesn't have a brother. And the reason why this real funny situation plays out here, where, you know, that his brother is Jim, but then Jim doesn't have a brother, is because this child cannot take Jim's perspective. And the ability to take another person's perspective, or to understand that other people think differently than you do, is called theory of mind. And theory of mind is the basis of empathy, the ability to feel, to feel the other person's emotions, to share in their emotions, to be able to put yourself in that person's shoes. That's all made possible by theory of mind. And theory of mind doesn't develop solidly or concretely until, the age of 6 or so. And so maybe at the end of the preoperational stage they show this, but for most of the preoperational stage, they're not able to engage in, or succeed at theory of mind tasks. Autistics are also not able to succeed at theory of mind tasks, and this is the reason why they lack empathy and they lack the ability to understand others, because they cannot take another person's perspective. And here's a basic theory of mind task. So we're going to define theory of mind as the ability to understand that others have their own thoughts and perspectives. So here you have Sally and you have Anne, and Sally puts her ball in the red cupboard. And Anne is still standing there, right? So Sally sees the ball in the red cupboard. Anne sees the ball in the red cupboard. Now Sally goes away, so Sally's gone. Anne now moves the ball from the red cupboard to the blue cupboard. Sally's not there when she's doing this. So now Sally comes back. Where is she going to look for the ball? Well, here you have to show theory of mind. So Sally put the ball originally in the red cupboard, and then Anne moved the ball from the red cupboard to the blue cupboard. But if you're Sally, you don't know that. So if you're Sally, you're going to look for the ball where you originally placed it, which is the red cupboard, because that's where you put the ball before you left. Right? You're Sally. You didn't see the ball move. If you can't take Sally's perspective, then you're going to say the ball's in the blue cupboard, and Sally's going to look in the blue cupboard, right? You're not able to take Sally's perspective. If you're able to take Sally's perspective, then you know that Sally has no idea that the ball got moved. Because when Sally left, the ball was in the red cupboard. She had no knowledge of the other girl, Anne, moving the ball to the blue cupboard. But you have to be able to take Sally's perspective to be able to look in the red cupboard. If you can't do that, you don't have theory of mind. And if you don't have theory of mind, you're going to have a hard time understanding others. So young children before the age of 6 or 7 do not have theory of mind. And so they don't really understand other children. They can't really understand a child's emotions, a child's thoughts, that a child could really think differently than they do. Oh, when they play with people, they understand we want to play with dinosaurs, or we want to play with Legos or Pokemon or whatever, right? Whatever children play with these days, animals. But they don't necessarily understand that other children may be adopting a different perspective. They may like different things than they do, right? For example, my nephew is 6 and he thinks everybody likes dinosaurs. He thought I liked dinosaurs. Maybe a long time ago I did. I don't think I really liked dinosaurs, but he was convinced that everyone liked dinosaurs. That this was the greatest thing in the world, and he couldn't understand that I didn't like dinosaurs. Because he was egocentric. Probably still is egocentric at the age of 6. He doesn't understand that different people like different things, or different people think differently than he does. And so with time, that will happen. He will develop theory of mind, and egocentrism will kind of go away. Here's the conservation task. Children in the pre-operational stage, according to Piaget, fail conservation. So in this conservation task, you see there's equal amounts of milk in each of the 2 glasses, right? You can verify that in the first picture. Now, one of the glasses of milk is poured into a tall, narrow container. And so that tall, narrow container, the milk is at a higher level. And the reason why the milk is at a higher level is because the container is much more narrow. The diameter of the container is much smaller than the regular glass, right? However, this child doesn't understand that. She doesn't understand that the shape of the container affects the level of the fluid. And so when they ask her which glass has more milk, she points to the tall, skinny glass, because the level of milk is higher. And she says, that one has more milk. But they're the exact same. It's just the only thing different is the dimensions of the glass, but she's not able to take that into consideration when making her judgment. Therefore, she is said to fail conservation. So children in the pre-operational stage between the ages of 2 and 6 or 7 fail conservation. Once they mature a little more and get to be older than 7, they jump to another stage. They jump to a concrete operational stage that we're going to talk about, and they're able to pass this task. Then they understand the dimensions of the glass have an effect on the levels of fluid in each of the glasses. Same thing with this row, 2 rows of mice here. So a child that's very young, below the age of 6, is going to say that the first row, the top row, has more mice than the bottom row. But in reality, they're the same number of mice. The top row is spread out more, and so the child doesn't, understand that the mice are spread out more. Therefore, it looks bigger, but it's the same number of mice. And so a child younger than 6 is going to pick the top row and say the top row has more mice. They're going to once again fail conservation task. Now, children with autism, obviously, they lack theory of mind, and they have many, many problems. They have difficulties in 3 general areas. They have trouble establishing mutual social interactions. Once again, probably because they don't have theory of mind, they lack empathy. And if you lack empathy, you don't understand what this other child or this other adult is feeling and doing. You can't put yourself in their shoes, and therefore, how are you going to have a successful social interaction if you can't relate to them at all? And autism is such a severe problem. I kind of relate to autism as, imagine if you were, dropped onto this planet, you were from another planet and you came here, your understanding of interactions would be very, very much strained. And that's what you see among autistic children. They just don't have that sense of how to interact effectively with others. And even when other children will come up to them to want to play with them, they won't understand what's really going on. And I've seen situations where autistic kids were playing with non-autistic kids, and the non-autistic kid comes up to the autistic child and says, "I want to play with you," and the autistic child just runs away in the opposite direction. Doesn't really understand what's going on, and it's a really sad sight to see, where the autistic child is struggling to interact socially. The world is just a very confusing place. Autistic children tend to use language and play symbolically, and they tend to struggle with language, especially if you have more severe autism. Your IQ is much lower, and you may not even be able to communicate. And so they will make like high-pitching, squealing sounds, and just have difficulty even saying words to another child. They may be able to communicate in some very basic way with the parent, but social interactions with autistic children, the autistic child, if it's severe autism, may not even be able to talk to them. And children with autistic spectrum have a severe problem displaying flexibility. So if they know they're supposed to do something at a specific time for a specific duration, you cannot change that. If you alter what they're comfortable with, like their routine, their daily routine, like if they have to play a video game at a certain time, or go on their tablet, or do something at a specific time of the day, and you change up their schedule, they get very, very agitated. And so they tend to be very strictly set in routine, and they have very low tolerance to deviation from this routine. And of course, children with autism have difficulty, mirroring the thoughts and actions of others. This is sometimes referred to as mind blindness, and this is another thing that's a component of the mirror neuron system not working properly. And, these autistic children just have deficits of mirror neuron functioning in the frontal lobe. And if we could fix that, we might be well on our way to curing autism, but we're not there yet. And the treatments for autism are limited. Most of them behavioral. Nothing is close to curing autism at the moment. There are some treatments that are shown to be somewhat effective, but not overly effective. And the best thing to do is start early, get the child diagnosed early, and get the child into therapy early to minimize the impact of autism. Now, when children turn 7 years of age, they enter Piaget's concrete operational stage. And it goes between 7 to 11, first grade to 11. Children start to grasp conservation, which I showed you before, and they're able to perform other concrete transformations. So this is the beginning of logical thinking. They also understand simple mathematical transformations. So they understand that addition is the opposite of subtraction, and that multiplication is the opposite of division. So here's the beginning of logical thinking. So concrete operational stage, children understand analogies like the brain is like a computer. They can do mathematics. They can't do formal operations. You need to be a little bit older. You need to be over 11 to 12 to start doing more abstract exercises. For example, if you take a 7-year-old who's in the concrete operational stage, and you ask them this, or you tell them this allegory, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. The 7-year-old is going to think of this very logically. The 7-year-old is going to say, well, you're not going to throw stones if you live in a glass house, because if you throw stones, you're going to break the house. And if you break the house, where are you going to live? Right? You can't throw stones in a glass house because the house will be broken. You can't live there. They take it very literally and very logically. And yes, that's very logical. I mean, throwing stones is going to break a glass house. It's a very logical idea. But that's not what this saying is all about. This saying is a comment on hypocrisy. Right? So that if you don't have your life together, don't be criticizing other people. You have to think of this more abstractly. You cannot take it literally. So children that are 7 years old in the concrete operational stage are taking it literally. Older children, 11, 12 plus, are taking it more abstractly because they're able to engage in more abstract reasoning. Same thing with more complex mathematics. So basic algebra. Here you have two equations, you got to solve for x. Now, younger children can't do algebra because they don't understand that letters can represent numbers. That's not logical. That's much too abstract. They understand the basic operations, but they don't understand that letters are substituting for numbers. By the time you're 12, 11 to 12, and you're in the formal operational stage, you can start grasping this more abstract concept that letters represent numbers. Now, some of you still probably can't do this. You should try it at home. It won't be on the test, don't worry. But you are capable of doing this because you're all in the formal operational stage. So you have the potential to learn this. Trying to teach this to a 7-year-old is not going to work unless that child is really advanced. I mean, they would have to be an extreme outlier to be able to do this work. But a typical 7-year-old is not going to understand that letters represent numbers, and it's going to be a very, very difficult, if not impossible, task to teach them this at that point. So let's talk a little bit about stranger anxiety. Stranger anxiety develops around the age of 9 to 13 months. In this stage, this is, according to PSY, this is a sensory motor stage. A child notices and fears new people. Sometimes you refer to it as stranger danger. Why does this develop? Well, children develop schemas for the primary people in their lives, like their parents and their siblings. And they're able to notice when strangers do not fit into those schemas. However, they don't have the ability to assimilate those faces yet. So why does it develop? Why are children afraid of strangers? Well, it could be an evolutionary principle, right? That children in the past that have learned to walk towards unfamiliar creatures, they have died. So if you go back thousands of years, young children that walk towards strange, unfamiliar creatures or unfamiliar surroundings didn't live long enough to pass on their genes. So evolutionary selected for infants around the age of 1 year of age to be afraid of strangers and to develop stranger danger. And you'll see stranger danger, stranger anxiety in the strange situation when we get to attachment. Attachment is a very interesting perspective that refers to an emotional tie to another person. In children, attachment is a desire to be close to a caregiver. And the origins of attachment started with the famous Harlow monkey study, where there were two fake mothers. They were wire mesh mothers. And the first wire mesh mother, the one on the left, had food. Right, so this wire mesh mother had food on the wire mesh mother, but it was not covered with the terry cloth. The terry cloth encasing that the wire mesh mother on the right had. So you could see that there's two mothers that this baby infant monkey can go to and cling to. One had food. The one on the left had food, but it was not comfortable to get close to because it was not covered with the terry cloth. It was just wire mesh. But this one had food. And the other monkey on the right had no food, but this mother was clothed with a very soft terry cloth that the infant monkey can snuggle up against. And what they found was if the infant monkey was not starving, the infant monkey always chose the terry cloth mother over the wire mesh mother. So it chose the one on the right versus the one on the left. And the reason why is that the one on the right just felt good, and the infant monkey can kind of cuddle up and hug that one, and it felt good to be close to the terry cloth mother. And the wire mesh mother didn't feel that good. Yes, the wire mesh mother had food, But the infant monkey chose closeness over food, which was not expected. You would just think the animal would choose food, but this was not the case. There was something about being close to the caregiver, in this case the terry cloth mother, that was satisfying for the infant monkey. And now monkeys and humans are very closely related, separated by only a fraction of their DNA, less than 1%. And so the origins of attachment can be displayed in monkeys, and it was displayed here. Attachment is important. In this case, attachment was more important than food. The origins of attachment come from familiarity. So many organisms have a critical period after they're born in which they will rigidly attach to a particular, could be a parent, but it could be something other than a parent. So right after birth, the child wants some kind of protector, wants something to attach to. In non-human species, this attachment is called imprinting. And you see this with birds. Birds will generally imprint or rigidly attach to the first moving object they see. Now, generally, the first moving object they see is the mother. But if you were to do something very unethical and remove the mother and have the bird hatch, and you had a hang glider, and that was the first moving object that the bird saw, the bird would attach to the hang glider, would imprint to the hang glider and act as if the hang glider was the bird's mother. Now, you don't want to try this. Obviously, this is very unethical. But you can do this because that's the rule. The rule is basically that the bird will attach or imprint to the first moving object. And if the mother is gone and the hang glider is there, the hang glider is the mother. And so imprinting is very similar to the human behavior of attachment. Now, there's a variety of attachment styles, and the attachment styles were first developed by John Bowlby, who was the founder of attachment theory, and by Mary Ainsworth, who was his assistant. And Mary Ainsworth set up a test to measure attachment in the laboratory, and this test was called the strain situation, and it was done on infants at 1 year of age. And so in this test, the mother and infant are alone in an unfamiliar or strange room. The child then explores the room as the mother just sits there. The stranger then enters the room, talks to the mother, and approaches the child. The mother then leaves the room. So this is an unfamiliar room. The mother and child are there at the beginning. The child's exploring. The stranger comes in right away. Stranger danger, 1 year of age, stranger anxiety. The stranger talks to the mother and approaches the child. The child's not very comfortable with that. The mother then leaves the room. Now, you can imagine the child now that the mother's gone and the stranger is there with the child alone. So that's a very stressful experience for the child. After a few moments, the mother then returns. And so what Ainsworth is looking at is the relationship when the mother returns between the child and the mother. How does the child react to the mother when the mother comes back? After the mother left the child there with a stranger. And so, based on the reaction, there are three main patterns or attachment styles early in life. The first style is secure attachment. This is the majority of children. They feel distressed and upset when the mother leaves, but they're very happy when the mother returns and they will seek contact with her immediately. Secure attachment is the best or the most ideal attachment style in infancy and even in adulthood. Right? So with the secure attachment, what's happening is the infant feels free to explore the environment, right? But the mother is there to act as a secure base. So if there's a problem, if the infant ever gets scared or encounters a problem in the environment that the infant's in, the infant can go back to the mother and get, the mother will take care of the infant. And so it's very important. The infant feels, comfortable exploring because the mother's there to act as a secure base. This is the healthiest attachment style that an infant can develop. And this is really with a mother that is consistently there for the child, but also lets the child explore and doesn't, and encourages the child to explore. And then unfortunately, there's a couple of insecure attachment styles. The insecure anxious style is when the infant clings to the mother, right? And when the mother leaves, the infant's very upset. When the mother comes back, the infant is pretty ambivalent about the mother. So the infant's kind of still upset, like, don't leave me, Mom, don't leave me. And then the mother comes back and it's like, how could you leave me? How could you leave me? I don't want you here. How could you leave me? So the infant's still crying when the mother comes back because the infant is upset at the mother for leaving him or her. This is the anxious style. And so this could be a result of an overprotective mother that kind of makes the infant believe that the world is a dangerous place. And so when the mother leaves, the infant is terrified and the infant clings to the mother. Like, when the mother comes back, the infant clings to the mother and is so upset that the mother left him. It was such a scary experience. That's the anxious, insecure style, or what is known as the ambivalent style. And then you have the insecure avoidant style, where the mother leaves, the infant kind of doesn't care. So in the secure case and in the anxious case, the infant cried when the mother left. But in the avoidant case, the infant's kind of indifferent. And when their mother comes back, the infant's still indifferent. Like, okay, Mom, you left. I can't rely on you anyway. I've never been able to rely on you to begin with. So when you leave, it's not a big deal. And you came back, well, I got along on my own. I didn't need you before, and I don't need you now. So I'm not happy you came back. I'm not upset. I'm not happy. I just learned to do it on my own. And the funny thing about attachment styles is that they persist throughout adulthood. So your attachment style at 1 year of age in the strange situation will correlate or predict your attachment style as an adult. And so you have secure people, securely attached people in the world, and you also have anxious people, and you also have avoidant people. And in terms of relationships, you see these attachment styles come up. So now the infant is attaching to the mother. When you become an adult, you attach to your romantic partner. And some of the most disturbed relationships happen when you have insecure attachment styles, dating or being together or marrying, etc. And a lot of times you see the avoidant and the anxious pair up. So you have one person that's anxious, and the other one's avoidant, and they get into a relationship, and then you get all kinds of craziness going on. So the anxious person is clingy. That's the clingy person. And so when you're gone, that's the person that's texting you, where are you? Every 5 minutes, where are you? Who are you with? When are you coming back? Don't go without me. Right? The very clinginess. That's the anxious or ambivalent style, or the person's clingy. So I'm sure you know people that are clingy and they're just like, you can't go anywhere on your own because they have to be with you at all times. And if you're not there, they're worried and they're upset. And then you have the avoidant person that's kind of like, give me my space. I need my space. I need my independence. I'm going to go out with my friends. Don't bother me. And then I'll come back to you when I feel like it. Right? They're like okay being on their own. They need space. So the clingy person pairs up with the avoidant person. The clingy person runs to the avoidant person. The avoidant person runs away from the clingy person. Right? It's like, I need space. So the avoidant person is saying, I need space. And the ambivalent or anxious person is saying, don't leave me. And you can see how that dynamic works out. It's just, it becomes a mess, right? It becomes a very troubled, very stressful relationship, but it happens very often. You can't have secure and secure people pairing up all the time. There's not enough of those people. But if you do have a secure person pairing up with another secure person, it's probably going to be a very stable, healthy relationship. The problem is there's just not enough of those people around. So you're going to have anxious, slash ambivalent. You're going to have avoidant people, and they're going to have their own problems in the relationship, and it all stems back to when they were an infant and their relationship with their mother. So your relationship with your mother at 1 year of age and before 1 year of age plays a big role, according to attachment theory, of determining your relationship with your significant other later in life. Now, it's very stable over time, according to attachment theory. You're not changing that much. So that might be good news for some of you, and that might be horrible news for some of you, but that's attachment theory. Now, attachment theory believes in a nurture view of things. That was not accepted by everybody. Some people rejected the nurture view, the attachment view, that your mother-child interaction shapes your behavior as a child. They didn't believe in that. They believed more in a nature view. They believed in the child's inborn temperament. So a child's temperament shapes behavior. They were born a certain way. Maybe they were just born very fussy or very easy, so they were relaxed. Some children are born relaxed. Some children are born very fussy and very difficult to deal with. Right? They cry all the time. They don't sleep. They don't like to eat. They're just complaining all the time as babies. So temperament is a measure of emotional reactivity. And temperament refers to your biological, behavior as a child. So your genes and your prenatal environment caused you to become an angry child or a happy child, a calm child, etc. So this has nothing to do with the mother-child bond. This is just pure biology affecting your behavior. And of course, attachment believes that the mother-child bond is the main variable or the main influence that affects a child's behavior and personality. So this is nurture. So temperament is nature and attachment is nurture. Once again, we get back to the nature-nurture debate. And the champion of temperament is Jerome Kagan. He's a researcher that fundamentally believes that temperament is the primary cause of behavioral changes in a child. And John Bowlby, of course, is the father of attachment theory that believes that it's the mother-child bond that shapes the child's personality and behavior and has a long-lasting impact. So nature, nurture, Kagan is nature, is temperament, Bowlby is nurture, and is attachment theory. Now, if you're deprived of attachment, there's a lot of negative consequences. So if children are not in a safe, nurturing, affectionate environment, they may still develop resiliency so they can bounce back and succeed. However, they may, have some negative outcomes. So they may have difficulty forming relationships or attachments later in life. They may have increased anxiety and depression, and they may have lower intelligence. So if you don't have a healthy, infant caregiver bond, you have higher rates, you have a higher chance of developing psychopathology later in life. And there's some correlational research out there with lowered intelligence. I'm not quite sure how strong that is, but psychopathology is definitely correlated with more of the insecure attachment styles. So if you have a problem with your caregiver early in life, you might have anxiety disorders, depression, and other things later in life. And maybe some aggression as well. Children in daycare, the research shows that time in daycare does not significantly increase or decrease separation anxiety. So there's not like this overwhelming negative aspect of putting children in daycare. These warm interactions with qualified people, and it's very difficult now to work at a daycare center working with young children. Businesses have really cut back and screened people heavily, and they want really qualified people to interact with children. And this may develop a more positive, more healthy, more secure attachment just by having these positive interactions with these caregivers in a daycare center. Time in daycare also correlates with advanced thinking skills. And unfortunately, it's also correlated with increased aggression and defiance. So there are some positive aspects of daycare and some negative aspects, but daycare as a whole is not having a tremendously negative impact on a child's development. And that could be a bit of welcome news for parents that have to work in today's rough economic climate. Now, children also develop a self-concept, and this self-concept changes from young childhood into adolescence and adulthood. So one of the major tasks is developing healthy attachments and forming a healthy self-concept, a stable and positive understanding of identity. And self-concept will change with development. By the age of 8 to 10, a child moves from "that's me in the mirror" to "I have skills, I have preferences, I have goals, I have things I want to do in this world." And this prepares a child for confident success. So it goes beyond self-recognition, which is early in life, to recognizing yourself as a capable person that can achieve a lot in this world. Now I want to talk a little bit about parenting styles. And if you're familiar with the TV show Wife Swap, you've probably seen this in action already. And there's three main parenting styles: authoritarian, which is the too hard. This is when parents impose rules, and they're very strict rules, and there's no room for discussion. These are the rules of the house. If you don't like them, leave. That's the authoritarian parent. They don't ask you your opinion. They set the rules, and you have to obey them. Then you have the opposite. You have your permissive parents, your too soft parents, where parents just give in to all their kids' desires, and they don't enforce any rules or any standards, and they kind of want to be friends with their kids and their kids' friends, and let's all hang out and let's just have fun. And oh, I don't care how late it is. I don't, there's no curfew, right? So they're just okay with whatever their parents do. They want to satisfy their kids constantly. And that's not healthy either. So those are the two extremes. And in Wife Swap, that's what you see. You see the authoritarian parents switching with the permissive parents. And then when they switch households, they're like, oh my God, what do I do here? This is crazy. I can't live here. I can't live under these rules or these lack of rules. And so that's the interesting part of it. It's just like culture shock for them, because these are the two extremes. And then you have the best, most balanced perspective, which is the authoritative perspective, where parents enforce the rules, but they also explain the rules to their children, and they also discuss things with their children. So it's not just, it's my way or the highway. It's, I want you to do this because it's going to help you. And so they really value the child's opinion when they set the rule and enforce the rule, and they explain why they're doing this. The authoritarian parent doesn't explain, doesn't care. They just have rules. The authoritative parent is actually sensitive to the child's understanding of the importance of those rules being set. And outcomes with parenting styles: authoritative parents are the most effective, and authoritative parenting is associated with high self-reliance, high social competence, high self-esteem, low levels of aggression. And could this be a function of just parenting, or could it be genetics, or could it be a combination? It could be a combination, but there's enough of these studies out there to suggest that authoritative parenting is playing a positive role compared to authoritarian and permissive parenting.